Hi, I'm Renee Devereaux with the Club for Creative Expression, and the objective of the club is to provide a platform from which people can express their passion and their individuality through artistic medium of their choice, thereby enriching their spiritual, emotional, and physical well-being. So what I've been creating at the Village are classes, for health, for nutrition, seminars in traditional Chinese medicine, and now even balance classes, because I want to have people stay upright. And the whole purpose is that people remain healthy in every sense of the word, so that they can access the innate gifts. I hate to see people get ill and then lose their focus and just be concerned with getting well. I feel that everybody has challenges and we can overcome them. Mind over matter, self-care, there's many, many ways that you can take care of that. And today, for my first show, and it is about brain and body regeneration. It is possible. It can be done. And today I'm introducing you, and I do need to read because there is so much that I can say about this extraordinary man who I have here with me. And his schooling spans a degree in nuclear medicine from the University of Cincinnati, a BA from the University of Phoenix, and assorted theater and music studies. He worked as a nuclear medicine technologist and at the same time developed skills as a medical intuitive. Stephen Dole is an Orange County neuroscientist and drum circle facilitator. This allows him to work with Western medicine, what he refers to as nuts and bolts medicine, as well as integrative medicine, or as he calls it, the unseen medicine. Stephen is also an inventor, a musician, actor, volunteer, composer, and the music that you will hear or that you heard at the background at the beginning and you will hear it again at the end is his own composition. He is a shining example of creative expression, and I'm deeply honored to have him here with me today. Welcome, Stephen. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And one of the many pieces of your life that absolutely fascinated me is how you seemed, so well entrenched in Western medicine, and you made this dramatic shift to include integrative medicine. Do you attribute that shift to the automobile accident that you mentioned? Can you talk about that?
My interest in integrative medicine goes back into my teenage years.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so back in the early 70s, there was there was a fair amount of news on ESP. And one of the first books that I had bought was by Dr. Wayne Dyer.
Okay.
And then I think he had Norman Vincent Peale, who wrote about some of the mindfulness topics. Mm-hmm. And so I began to explore that while I started in pre-med in 1973.
All right.
And then I realized after about a year or so that my heart was not really in that for the long term. And so I was able to get into nuclear medicine and get out of school sooner and begin working. And then I continued in personal studies.
I see. But I remember that you mentioned the accident. Was that a turning point for you?
I think for the accident, it was by far the biggest challenge in my life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the irony is I wanted to leave healthcare at that time. So I was doing work as a promoter in sports and entertainment, and my plans were to gradually leave the healthcare field and get into sports and entertainment management. And of course the accident, that just changed all those plans.
It's like the universe had other plans for you.
It did,
mm-hmm.
Yes.
And so what was the outcome of that accident?
Well, so here's another irony. So I ended up with a disorder called hydrocephalus because apparently I had some sort of small bleed or something that happened on my brain, the surface of my brain. It took about a month to show up after the accident. It was just subtle symptoms that gradually got worse and worse.
So is that like blood in the brain, or is it water? Is it hydrocephalus?
Yes.
So explain that to our audience a little bit, because most of us don't really have a grasp of that.
Hydrocephalus is generically, many people call it water in the brain. And so the most common form is children that are born with it.
I see.
Yeah,
okay.
So it's an in utero issue, it's a genetic issue at times. And then oftentimes after a cyst in a growing child, or a head injury, in my case, or in aging. So in the adult population, it's called normal pressure hydrocephalus.
Okay, so it does happen naturally,
yes,
so-called,
yes,
in an aging population.
Yes, and then I had worked with it in nuclear medicine, so I was very familiar with it and done testing on it. And so then I became a patient with it. And so my initial surgeries did not go well, and that's my experience of working with it was that way. There was a lot of misunderstanding of these shunt devices. And so after a few years, I ended up petitioning the Food and Drug Administration on some of these issues.
Yes, I realize you are an inventor.
And well, initially I didn't plan on being an inventor. I was just following. What happened when I go to my neurosurgeon and ask him questions, why this is working, he says, well, you got to talk to the manufacturer of the shunt. I talked to the manufacturer of the shunt, and they said, well, you got to talk to FDA. You talk to FDA, and they said, well, you got to talk to Congress. So everybody was doing this. And so I said, okay, and I began talking to scientists in the field and some of the companies, and it was a scientist at one of the companies that was based in France who shared this study with me that he knew I'd be interested in. And so also during that time, I talked with one of the pioneers. We became sort of friends, Dr. John Holter, who, by the way, he was a technician. He's a lab technician. He was on the cover of Life magazine in the late 50s as a pioneer, and he never went back to school. But he was labeled a neuroscientist for his efforts. So we befriended, and then I became involved in petitioning the Food and Drug Administration.
And so you actually developed a tool with which you could help yourself.
A testing system to direct my own surgeries and everybody else like this.
Isn't that... That's just miraculous. And so what I've also seen in your webpage and all the blogs that you have written and the articles is how you took charge of your own health and healing. What I admire so much is your commitment to remain independent and not to be so reliant on medicine.
Yes.
So please speak on that. Just your process from having this injury and knowing that you're debilitated and then taking action. And so you developed this tool where you could direct your own surgeries. And then what next? So
are you asking about the integrative side, integrative medicine side?
Yes, because I understand that that's a big part of your healing.
And so that skill came up over some personal things that I was doing back in 1981, and not only did it help me through an illness, but I realized in my patients that I always worked up and did clinical histories and worked with a radiologist on the results, that I could tell what was wrong with them before the results were done. And back then, when I would tell people that, they'd laugh at me, but I was probably 70 or 80% accurate. I did a lot of cancer work. Then I began to interview my patients on all this.
And that's when you started to realize you were a medical intuitive?
I knew then that I had a real connection, but I actually wanted to do that for work back in 1981, 82, but it didn't exist. So I started my own medical imaging company in 1982, which allowed me a little more freedom, because I wasn't an employee of a hospital or anybody else. So it gave me the freedom to interview my patients when I did have, I still hired other people, but I still had direct patient contact.
Well, I do find it so incredibly interesting that you began to rely more and more on your intuitive skills.
Yes. And then, so now what happened, so my injury and all this, the hydrocephalus was in 1992. So for the first several years, my abilities, should we call it. Intuitive skills were not there. It took a while to come back.
So do you think that the accident or the hydrocephalus actually enhanced your intuitive skills?
I think, you know what, it really put me to the test. I mean, just really put me to the test in every way you can possibly imagine. Because it forced me to push myself in ways that I don't think people ever would. It just, and then so with the music, I started doing music again to deal with the emotional issues from this. And you see people who go through trauma and horrible things, people, the soldiers coming back from wartime, Iraq and whatnot, that things like the arts can be really good for that aspect, for that aspect of care. So I was doing it for that, and I began to take classes at Orange Coast College, because at that time I just wasn't you know, well enough to work or do anything that was all that challenging.
And so were they music classes?
Yes, there were music classes.
Okay.
And so I took a series of music classes for several years over there, and I met people. And then, matter of fact, the person who plays piano on my song Evening Solstice is a woman who I met there, who's a pianist, a graduate at Chapman University, and she plays around as a piano teacher. And I actually, so the song Evening Solstice was just something a melody I was playing with around that time, right? And so I took a music theory course, which was real challenging for my memory, my cognitive issues. Well, the teacher says, you have to write a song, notate it, and play it, record it. I don't think we played it for the class, but we had to do from beginning to end. And so one night, I had my son over there who was 12 or 13. I said, so Nick, so what do you think of this song? It's an instrumental piece. He says, well, Dad, I like it. So I said, okay, so I'll submit this for this class assignment. And that was 96. It wasn't until 5 years later, I think in 2001, that I recorded it. And this friend, Susan Latchner, we got together, and she came over with her keyboard, and she bought this Boss recorder. So she played the keyboard, and I did the mixing part of it.
I see. So was it from that music connection that you started the drumming? I mean, because it's fascinating how you applied the drumming and the music to your own healing.
Yeah.
Because you see, I'm an advocate of music and dance and movement. So it's sort of a mystery to me to see how it came together for you.
So during those years, it was actually separate. So I did the work like out of this petition that I wrote, and I developed this mHealth test. I designed these algorithms. It was a software program to run on a PDA, and this was in '97. And then, you know, as part of my petition, and then a year or two later formed a startup company. So I was doing two things. I was doing the mHealth neuroscience stuff with nuts and bolts, Western medicine, but then I was doing the music for enjoyment and relaxation. But because of my cognitive challenges, I was sort of good with math and tech. I began to look at, you know, ways. I used to make these elaborate decision trees. My father would comment, I would put sheets of paper together and make these big charts to help me remember things and work on things. So that was before we had technology and apps and everything. And then so the PDAs came out, and I started using those. You know, that was 1999. I had the first Palm Pilot. Yeah, when that came out in 1999. And so I had my startup company, but you know, the medical field could be extraordinarily political. And at the conference in FDA, they did not let me be on the panel that I was responsible for. We did not talk about my DIACEPT test. And then at University in Irvine, I always thought I was called a pioneer in the field. Their business office said that nobody on staff could write my NIH grants unless they owned the project. So everywhere I went, and of course the medical manufacturers of these shunts, they didn't really want it because of what it showed a lot of the problems that are going on with these devices.
Correct.
And at that time I had 3 or 4 surgeries, so I used it to direct my corrective surgery in February of '98. It was my 4th. Well, now I've had 12.
Oh my goodness.
And I would argue if my DIACEPT tests were available and in use, I wouldn't have had 12 surgeries, because it would have created a platform for patients, scientists, physicians, neurosurgeons, from everybody to look at these device failures and to look at design work and how you can make a better one. And so it just never came to pass. But my music, I kept doing it. So it was, I actually did a real important study with music in 2001 or 2002 on sensory processing, on sound. And it really came from the work they had done. You're probably familiar with some of this. In PTSD, it was there's a term, it's part of psychotherapy, EMDR therapy.
Correct.
And there was a big study that came out in 2001 and how it helped sensory processing issues for brain injury. And I looked at that. I had a really nice neurologist at the time in Orange, Dr. Brian Boyd, and we discussed that. And he was really helpful, for just a neurologist during those years. And so I said, I'm going to do a study. So I got a metronome. Part of the Boss recording unit had a metronome in it, and then so what I designed a study, and I took it to a conference at Chalk in Orange, because a friend, neurosurgeon, Dr. Mike Mihonen, is one of the head guys up there. So at this conference, I had a balance pad because I've been going through balance therapy. I had a balance pad, I had my metronome, and I was exposing people to the different patterns of sound. What I believed was a monotonous sound that didn't have a rhythmic pattern you could lock into was more difficult to handle. So when you look at sensory processing disorder, like from white noise and crowd noise and just construction noise, what I was hearing from other people was like machinery. Those real repetitive sounds were difficult to handle and really gave people a hard time with their neurological complaints. But I also wanted to look on the balance pad. So what I found was fascinating. People who reported more problematic headaches, so this was primarily in the hydrocephalus population. So the patients who reported ongoing headaches and balance problems, more problematic, when I had them on the balance pad and I asked them to look at a moving target, they failed that test. And what that meant was their balance centers, you have four, you have your feet, you have the middle ear, you have your eyes in the center of your brain. So what that meant was one or two of their balance centers, like myself, were affected. So as a result, I was using my vision, as these other people were, to help make up for balance issues. And that's called gaze stabilization. You're more dependent on your vision. And so what happens with people like me and that have this, anything that affects your vision will affect your balance. That is why I buy glasses that have no frame on the bottom, because just the frame, anything that obstructs vision is going to affect your balance. And I really think that's a big issue for seniors that have balance issues. Well, so when it comes to glasses, to think about that. And so, so that I was doing. So the EMDR study launched me to do my study, and what I confirmed was that, in fact, those repetitive sounds were more problematic. So I made an audio tape and I shared it. I sent it with the house clinic. I put it on my website, but no one really cared. So here I did this great investigative study, and so that was in 2001, 2002. So I put it on my website. Okay. So it was in 2004, I bought a djembe drum. I was at a music store. I can't remember if it was Sam Asher Guitar Center. But I saw this djembe drum. I thought, if I had that, we'd have some percussion when I jam with my friends. So I grew up with piano, and then I learned guitar after my injury. And so between piano and guitar. Now, the challenge was, with my memory challenges, I couldn't remember lyrics very well or music, so it was always sort of an issue. So
but not enough to have it stop you.
No, but it was something that I had to take into account.
Overcome.
And so here's the strange thing. So I get this African drum, djembe drum, and I knew how to play because I was a musician growing up, so I kind of knew percussion. And so I start playing with my friends, and I picked it up real quick, and then somebody says, you should go play in a drum circle. And I said, what's a drum circle?
Okay, and give us a sample. I mean, what happens to the brain?
So the thing that probably helps me most is sort of initiation of movement and timing and coordination. So And so what that does, it gives movement. It gives a sound to movement. And this is actually, that's a 6/8, which is an African root. And it's so much about movement. And so I was actually doing things with movement in the few years after my accident. What I would do, I would put I'm left-handed, I would put my opposite hand out when I would drive, and if I was at a busy intersection, it helped me concentrate. Matter of fact, I did it driving here today with all the traffic. And what I began to realize, that I did this for a long time until I was watching baseball one day. I was watching Ricky Henderson as he would steal, one of the best baseball stealers ever. And his fingers, he had these finger technique. And I thought, there's a reason to that. And what it is, these finger movements, your body, the proprioception, actually is an extension of your cognitive ability, your cognitive capacity. So when you do something like this, it helps you focus because it becomes an extension of your awareness.
Exactly. So it's about mind-body movement integration.
Yes.
And stabilizing, balancing.
Yes.
Yes, because right now I know that there's a study at UCI where they are noticing, or actually studying, the increase in mental capacity through sound.
It's fascinating. Now, with drumming, so one of the principal concepts in drumming is what's called brainwave entrainment. This is in the group setting. So one of the biggest studies was done maybe 10 years ago. What they found is after about 10 minutes in drumming, the group, their brain waves will all begin to act alike. You know, you have the 4 different, you know, from alpha to beta, gamma. So you have the different levels, and when you get everybody, some people call that being on the same page.
Correct.
And in sports is just fascinating, and that's why the drumming took me to basketball. And what had happened, I did this sort of just fitness, and then it was around 2007 I realized that when I would be on the court doing my exercises, the dribbling and moving around, it was a good way for me to see how my balance issues were. And I noticed the more I drummed, the better I felt with the ball, sort of the tactile.
The more balanced you became.
Yes, and then I met a friend that we would talk philosophy, and one day I said, Al, where's the shot come from? And then I began to really delve into the psychology of, and so I wrote a blog several years ago called Sports Science versus the Brain Science of Basketball. Where does the shot come from? And that is so important because it gets right into healing. It's that place in your mind, in your heart, in your consciousness where dreams come true.
Precisely. And that's why you're here. And thank you so much. It's been just wonderful to have you, because I know that mind and brain is able to regenerate. And I believe that, you know, it's part of our self-interest to take charge of our health and find different methods of healing. And I know that you do take supplements and that you do many things to help yourself. We all have challenges, and that's what what I want to convey to people, that yes, we have challenges, but that doesn't mean that we should stop or that we should give up. Get well. It is mind over matter, isn't it?
Yes.
We can declare that, all right, I've been sick enough, and now I want my freedom.
Yes.
I do that regularly. So it is about trusting yourself, trusting your intuition. We are our own best healer. And is there anything you'd like to close with?
Well, I think, so I'm still involved in both forms of medicine, the Western medicine, nuts and bolts, and then the unseen, and they're coming closer and closer and closer together. And I've had a vision for a long time that the technology, like maybe mobile apps to help with cognitive, would help the healing arts, because our weakest part of our brain is memory.
Yes.
And so if somehow we can help our memory, through that we can solve a lot more challenges in our life by bringing the two together. So you do the exercises for your psyche and your intuitive and your integrative medicine, as well as still taking the pills and eating the apples and things like that, where those two come together. Yes.
Doing all the right things. I thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your expertise and your knowledge, and And I thank the audience for watching, and I'd love to have some feedback. In the meantime, please be aware that I do teach balance classes in the Spruce Room every Tuesday at 4 o'clock. And you're welcome to join. You don't have to pre-register, and it is a drop-in. Okay, so thank you again. Bye-bye.